Hey y'all, it's Vanessa with Farmgirl Gardens and Market, and today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about 5 AgriStem or agroeducation lessons that you can do with your kiddos during kind of this global quarantine month. So if y'all are like me, our family and homestead is following the recommendation for social distancing, not just because as a prego person I am a little bit more immunocompromised than the general population, and then also I am always a little bit more immunocompromised because I have a connective tissue disorder, which I don't think I've ever shared here before. Anyway, that's a whole different video. The point being is that I'm also a mama. My kids are home. I know many of y'all are mamas and you've got kiddos at home, and I know the schools are working so diligently to get online material and curriculum available. But you know what? This is like the first time in history any of this has really happened, and some of us are struggling to create some rhythm and order in lessons. And so I just wanted to pop on here and share 5 of my favorite environmental AgriStem education lessons that I bring into school gardens and school classrooms, and hope to encourage you to share with your kiddos. If not all of it, most of this stuff is something that you probably already have in your home and doesn't require a grocery trip. That being said, the first thing I want to talk about is propagating plants from grocery store starts. A lot of people are now realizing the importance of having a backyard garden, but because of social distancing are reluctant to go into stores, and I understand that. So one of the things I wanted to share with you is how you can use grocery store starts to get a small self-reliance garden started just this week while you're home. And so what that can look like is on the celery plant, for example. If you purchase the whole crown of the celery, when you're chopping your celery, save that crown, and then you'll want to put it into some non-chlorinated water. You can leave your tap water out exposed to light for 24 hours to dechlorinate it naturally, or you can use filtered water or even rainwater. But stick it in a sunny window, and in a few days you will get this vigorous root system, and then this guy can go straight into the ground. And I actually have had celery regrow from grocery store starts that have lasted 2 years. Now, you do want to make sure that you're continuing to harvest it so that it doesn't bolt on you, but it's a really fun and fast way to get some established celery in the ground. I do recommend always that you purchase an organic product to start with, because usually those have better success with this method. But that is how you would propagate celery from your fridge. And then a similar approach to that is with things like basil. Again, you can propagate or clone from a clipping of an established plant. Now, I actually didn't get my Thai basil propagated in time this season, and I sure as heck wasn't going to find it in the store because it's kind of a fancier basil than what most of our box stores carry. But you can purchase organic Thai basil from your grocery store, and you can actually take that and do the same process where you're rooting it in water. And so this is some Thai basil that has just been in water in a sunny window, and you can already tell that these roots have started to develop. And so the next step is that I'm just going to pot these up, and in fact I have been doing that for a few days now because I've been working on getting some plants ready for a school garden. And this is actually just one of the clones that I cut and propagated roots within like 48, 72 hours. I think maybe it was 3 days maximum. So that's a really great way to get some plants started, and to also get some different varieties of basil or herbs that maybe you can't get your hands on anyway. This will work better with soft-stemmed herbs. Rosemary or thyme, things that are really woody, are not going to be as successful with this method. But on that note, one of the other ways that you can source plants during this time of kind of social isolation is to purchase fresh, or what's called living herbs, through your grocery order, online order, or if you are going to store and you still have access to store hours, then I really do recommend this particular brand, Shenandoah Growers Not sponsored by them, but this is the one I look for when I'm trying to do this. These are called living herbs, and so they actually are in the grocery store, and they come, it's a plant, it's a potted plant. And what's so fascinating to me is that this will run you about $2. It's cheaper to buy a whole living plant with soil that's organic than to buy the equivalent versions, actually from the same manufacturer, Shenandoah Growers. This was $3.50. This was $2. And if you wanted to buy the same size live plant at Home Depot or Lowe's, you'd be spending at least $3.50 to maybe even $6 for a basil this size. So I think that's just a great deal. Coronavirus, quarantine, or otherwise, this is a great deal. So that is how you would do celery or basil and how you would source them. And then another thing that you can actually propagate right now from your cupboard is if you have a sweet potato, you can, and again, I recommend you use organic because anything that's grown outside of the U.S. Or isn't organic has been treated in some way to keep it from being a biosecurity. So that often means that it doesn't have the same response to propagation, or it could actually be sterile. But organic sweet potato, this is actually a purple one, so I'm excited about that. You just take the sweet potato, same exact method. You're putting it in some non-chlorinated or some filtered water, sticking it in a sunny window or under a grow light. Now, do make sure that your windows don't have a UV coating, because even if it's a sunny window, if it has that coating on it, the plant's not going to get the UV rays that it needs. But once these guys have sprouted, what the next step to do is to actually just peel this guy off like this, and then you will also stick him in water. And he will also root. And I wish that I had, ooh, hold on, I do. Sorry, we were very ambitious and we've been doing a lot of these. And so as you can see, once you pull off the sprout that grows, you'll stick this in water again until it roots. And then through the magic of YouTube, that looks like this. Do you see those roots on there? This can now be planted directly in the ground. Now that said, actually, you do want to give it maybe another week. We want to get some consistent nighttime temps that are, 50, 60 plus. Some of these early or mid-spring breaks in the weather are still a little bit too cool for sweet potatoes, but these can hang out for a long time on a sunny window in this little thing of water. So that is the step one for how to propagate plants from grocery store starts. Another activity that is super fun to do with kiddos is actually painting strawberry rocks. And so this is the time in season where all of our strawberries, if you already have them in the ground, they're starting to bloom and flower. Well, if you start putting out strawberry decoys, all of the birds are going to attack your decoy thinking it's a berry, and they'll learn that that's not a food source. So that in a few months, when those flowers are turned to strawberries and they're big and beautiful on the vine, the birds are not as inclined to attack them because they're going to think, oh, it's just the, rock that looked like a strawberry. This does work. I have seen this work really well. So this is a great one to get those kiddos painted and some rocks for your garden while we have this week of waiting inside with not only quarantine, but here in our area, it's been raining all week. So painted rocks. And then the other one that I wanted to talk about is worm farms. So we use a lot of vermicomposting methods in our homestead. Vermicomposting is when you are composting, harnessing the work of worms. When they are chewing through the soil and digesting it through their body, they are actually making a 100% bioavailable fertilizer that will never burn your plants because the animal, the worm, has already digested it and made it bioavailable. And so the product of the worm is called worm castings. That's a fancy way for saying worm poop. And it's this beautiful, rich, verdant, abundant material. And so I'm telling you, you can make liquid top treatment out of this by adding a couple of tablespoons to worm castings to water and spraying it as a treatment. You can add it to the planting hole or use it to amend your grow space. You can even use it as a foliar treatment if you have any type of diseases in your plants, especially tomatoes with like blight. So It's just a wonderful product to make. Now, while you can buy it at a really expensive price point, most of those bags are plastic bags, right? And they've been trucked and shipped and stored. And so you can buy worm castings, but you're not going to ever have the same quality as producing your own. And so the easiest way to get into keeping worms is the bucket system. And I typically recommend using pickle buckets, or at Home Depot, I think they're called the Homer buckets. But they're basically 5-gallon buckets with a handle, and you can have a lid to it. Now, those will run you about $4 a piece. Quick tip, if you're a garden or community garden educator and you need something cheap, check out Thundercloud Subs. They actually have a program where you can purchase for $2 each a bucket with lids, and all of the proceeds to that go to support their associated firefighter nonprofit. So that is an awesome way to get some cheap, good quality buckets that are also helping the helpers in our community. So once you have your bucket, what you'll want to do, and I recommend, I didn't have a pickle bucket on hand, but I recommend when you get buckets that you get two, one of which you will drill drainage holes and air holes in, and the other you'll leave to sink the bucket with holes into, so you don't get any type of leaks or messes in your classroom. Another thing that you can do is just make sure that you're leaving some space below for liquid aggregate to collect, so that that doesn't drain out on you, or you could just put your bucket in another tub, which is what I'll be doing with this one, because this is my classroom demonstration. So what you'll do once you have your bucket, and the key elements, whether it's a bucket or a tub, you want to make sure that it's opaque. Worms are very photosensitive. They do not like the light, which is why they live underneath the ground. And so if you have a clear bucket, even though that's nice to observe, it's really stressful for the worms, and they just won't do well. But the bucket should also have plenty of drainage and air holes available. I just used my little drill to get these. It does help if you can drill from the inside out, so that the chat of the plastic remnant, when you've drilled into it, is on the outside, so it's not sharp for the worms. Then you'll get your bedding material. So when you're vermicomposting, you are not layering equal ratio of carbon to nitrogen like you would in a traditional pile. What you are doing is you are still adding equal ratio carbon to nitrogen, but instead of layering it like lasagna style, you're actually allocating the carbon as bedding and the nitrogen, which is largely green waste, kitchen produce scraps, as the food. And so that is for a couple of reasons. If you were to layer it, you would actually start composting and generating heat in your bucket, and that's not good for your worms. By allocating the newspaper or the carbon, or even dry brown grass, leaves, whatever your carbon source is, as the bedding, the worms can choose to live in the bedding and mate and breed, which is what they do there, or they can exit the bedding and go to the food source and eat. And so that's a really important method for how you establish your bin. But basically, you will take all of your paper scraps. I had my kiddos tearing up newspaper, or if you are going through your school folders and you have an abundance of precious artwork, you can tear those up when no one's watching and include those as well. So a little composting lesson there for you. And then the next step is sourcing your worms. And so I actually purchased these online. Now, here's the thing. In the composting world, you're always going to hear people talk about red wrigglers being the composting worm. And they are. They are one of the most voracious worm eaters in known existence. The problem in Texas is that they are very much like Texans. And when it gets above 70 degrees, they just are not happy. And unfortunately, unless you can temperature control them or keep them inside, red wrigglers, or Acina fetida is their scientific name, is not a good choice in my opinion. And also, they're not a native species to North Texas, so it's not a good practice to use those worms here in my opinion. What I prefer to use are Alabama jumpers. Alabama jumpers are often known as a bait worm. They're called that because, again, worms are very photophobic, and so they're sensitive to sunlight. They like living underneath the soil. When you shine light on an Alabama jumper, it will jump up just to get down. A really wiggly worm, and so, as a result, great bait worm. And you can find them for cheap in a lot of just bait and tackle shops. But if you can't, or if yours are out, you can also find them online. So I had purchased some Alabama jumpers online. They came in this cute little cloth bag, and I wasn't ready to install them yet, so I put them in a temporary setup, and I want to show you that quickly. But once your worms come in, you want to immediately get them into either their worm bin or a temporary setup so that they're not stressed. You want to make sure that the bedding material is sponge damp and nothing oversaturated, because worms can drown. That's why after it rains, guys, you see the worms coming out of the ground, because they can actually drown when things are too saturated. And so let me see if I can do this quick enough, because these are jumpers, so they will move. There we go. Okay, do you see them? Oh, here, let me do this. There we go. Do you see those beautiful guys? And so this is kind of the friability and the moisture level that we're looking at, you know, sponge damp. And now that I have my guys, he's hiding, he's trying to hide. Now that I have my guys, all that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put them into this bucket with their bedding, and then my kitchen scraps and green waste, no meat, no dairy, no onions, no citrus. Those things are caustic to the worm, and or they won't eat them. You'll put your worm with their bedding in here. You'll cover them over top with more bedding, and then you'll put food in just like a separate clump away from them. So like in this size bin, my worms are gonna go right here, and my little pile of food will go here. They will eat through that throughout the week, and then once that food volume goes down is when I will add more in. Typically, a worm can eat half its body weight in ounces of food per day. So you're probably gonna need to start small, because unless you buy a lot of worms. And so just to give you some numbers to look at, a colony of around 500 worms will cost about 50 bucks. And a colony of 500 worms can eat about half a pound of food a week. So just keep kind of that ratio and numbers in mind. They reproduce aggressively. So I always say, put $20 into purchasing your worms, and then set their bin up small, maintain it for about 2 months, and every time that one of their cocoons hatches, they don't lay eggs, they lay cocoons, there can be up to 20 to 30 worms in each cocoon. So exponential growth in these colonies. So $20 worth of worms in about a month of time will get you thousands of worms. With that, you can grow thousands of pounds of food. So I love setting up worm farms, and I think that that's a super fun way to spend your week, teaching the kiddos about how to be sustainable in producing your own worm compost and recycling a lot of your paper waste and even your green waste. If you have any questions about worms, if you are an educator in my area and you need some access to worms, let me know. I'm happy to share. The last thing that I wanted to share with you is actually one I've reviewed before. This is a Back to the Roots mushroom kit. These used to be so hard to find, and thankfully they're not anymore. So while I will include an Amazon link so that you don't have to go to the store, once things cool down and it's safe to go, you will be able to find these in Home Depot and Lowe's, and I've even seen them at Walmart. But what it is it's basically a compressed cube of mostly sawdust and wood filler, and then spores of mushrooms, depending on the type that you picked. This is an oyster mushroom kit. You will follow the instructions on the box, but it's super simple. Basically, you're just gonna hydrate this cube and then spray it down with a little spray bottle of water twice a day until you start to get the spores develop. Now this one I actually used as a demonstration, and so I've saved it that way. So this is what the kit will look like in the front. You get 2 grows per kit. I want to say it's around 20 bucks. I don't remember anymore. I'll find it and link it. But this is the oyster mushroom kit, what the oyster mushrooms look like once they are grown. Now, these are actually dried, so if I wanted to harvest them and use them as dried, I could. They're so much better fresh, and I think that's the real value of these, but this is my demonstration for my classrooms. So anyway, I hope that those have been helpful, you know, little mini lessons that you can incorporate throughout this next month or so of social distancing. I hope that y'all are staying well. If you have any gardening questions, please do reach out to me. I am actually not taking on-site consults anymore at this point due to social distancing and just where I'm at in my pregnancy, but I do still have phone consult sessions available. So if you need some more in-depth coaching, or if you have some areas where you want a little bit more support, reach out to me. I'm always happy to help people get up and growing. And on that note, I'm gonna get back to growing some things. I will see y'all in a bit. Bye, y'all.